All right, Ms. Walton, so happy to have you. Thank you for joining. This is Who Sent You? You know that saying, we don't want nobody that nobody sent. And so, me as a recovering, I'm a journalist, but as a recovering politician myself, I know what it means when people look at you and say, where'd you come from? Who you got and all of that. And so as a former independent candidate and talking to you, love you to introduce yourself and tell me who sent you.
Yeah. So my name is Tameka Walton, and I've been around doing nonprofit organizing work for about 20 years, right? And so I am a mom of four. My oldest is 19, going into his sophomore year of college. My youngest is 8, heading into third grade. And so when I think about like who sent me, it's literally the folks that I represent, right? My nonprofit, I represent Black and Brown women and girls, and then my children, right? Um, and I always like to say that everything that I do, I want to represent my children, right? Because they literally are, and then their peers, right? But they literally are like the next generation, and they're watching me, right? So, in this particular time, my children, like, and their peers, and the women that I represent through Restored Hope, they sent me.
I love that. Tell me about Restored Hope, just briefly, the work that you do.
Yeah, really briefly, Restored Hope is a nonprofit that's 16 years old this year, and we provide somatic services, so mind-body connection, couple it with traditional therapy, as well as like tangible resources. So, diapers and wipes for the moms, parenting classes. We do a lot of just as informed work with young women, right? Just really helping them understand, if they got themselves in a situation, what it feels like in their bodies, right? Just really getting folks to connect with their bodies, reproductive justice, all the themes, but tying it directly to somatics, right? Because we really feel like, especially with Black women, that we are checking out at a large and scary rate. And it just isn't our health, right? And so somatically, we can understand where stress lives in our bodies. And I feel like we have a fighting chance on top of other things, right? Like the systems, it's a whole nother conversation. But just dealing with our bodies, right? That's something that we can control and we have autonomy over. That's what Restored Hope does.
Yeah, so you mentioned when you talked about the somatic element of the work that you do and the stress, in another life, I was a wellness practitioner, so I understand that you teach yoga, you've referred me for opportunities as well. You know, is that something, maybe not necessarily a program, but an ethos or anything like that that you want to bring to this opportunity that you're running for? So tell us, what you're running for, the district and all of that, but then also like any of this mind body wellness that you can see could lend itself to supporting Chicago public school students, particularly our Black children that live in some very tough communities where they have to navigate a lot of things and they hold on to a lot of stress.
That's right. Yeah. So I'm running for the Chicago School Board, primarily District A, right? 10A, I'm sorry, District 10A. And I got started years ago teaching yoga inside of CPS, right? And at first they brought me in to do like the restorative classrooms and calm classrooms or different things like that, like teaching teachers first, because the teachers are the ones that are in front of the students, right? And teachers have a lived experience. They're coming in, from drives, they're coming in for them with their own families, or coming into a classroom, and sometimes they haven't let go of whatever they've had to deal with prior to coming into that classroom, right? And so I first started with just teaching the teachers, just, how to get in tune with their own bodies, right? Like how to process their own stressors and deal with their own stress. Um, to understand what it feels like when like literally when a child kind of challenges them, what comes up in your body when that student is like not listening to you, right? Or even when you have a student that you really can't reach, right? Because there's more going on in the classroom. What's showing up in your own bodies, right? I feel like that's important as well. And then, of course, we started working with, the youth because the youth are carrying the weight of the world. And if we don't give them space to really process, how can they learn? Right. And I realized that it wasn't as simple as yoga, right? It wasn't as simple as, downward dogs. That's so foreign to people, right? But taking a breath, right? Tapping, all things somatic, right? Just really, you know, analyzing for that moment before you respond what your body is telling you. It's very important for our students, but it's also, again, very important for the teachers, for the administrators across the board. Everybody is carrying something. And I really feel like, mental health and mental wellness since COVID has become I don't want to say like buzzwords, right? But they have. So how do we really put it in practice and make sure that our students are well? What does it look like for wellness? Yes, that is very important to me as I'm running for this seat.
Okay, so you're running for this seat. Is this your first time running? Tell us about your first intro to politics in the wild, wild streets of Chicago, because it's nothing to play with.
Yeah. So here's the deal. I when I thought of the Chicago School Board, I thought of it as just the entity and the body to do right by my students, my as in my children, but then also Chicago students, right? I don't think I realized the realm that I was going to as it related to actually being Chicago politics. Does that make sense? I'm like, this isn't an automatic seat. This isn't a state rep.
I
This
get
isn't,
it.
you know.
Hmm.
But what I've learned is that because of just the responsibility, right? And because of the level of power that one holds when you're sitting in as a Chicago board member, this is like all hands on deck when it comes to, getting ballot access, if I can just say that word, right? And so my first experience with this is just trying to retain my spot on the ballot. I've done all the things. You needed 500 signatures. I got double the amount of signatures. Um, and I know what it meant to be challenged, right? When your signatures are challenged, but I didn't know what it meant, I guess. And if I can just bring in that embodiment, right? When I think about how it feels going through something that should be an inherited right, right? Um, having your name on that ballot,
And you
allow,
mean right as being able to run for office? That's what.
yeah, right? Like if you meet the basic qualifications,
Hmm.
right? Um, the voters should be able to take it from there.
Hmm.
But that's not how Chicago works, right? You have to go through and it's so normalized that every time I bring it up, they're like, oh, that's just Chicago politics, right? You got to go through line by line your signatures if you're challenged, if that's a right signature. If someone has a dot, is that a dot that's on their voter's registration card? All the things, Nicole. Squiggly lines. You know what I mean? It's like this is what politics is, right? Um, so it can be very discouraging, but I remember the mission and I keep going. But this is also when I think about access, I think about it's timely. I spent 8 hours a day for 5 days at the Board of Elections in front of two screens because I have two challenges going over signatures, right? While my objector is being paid $45 an hour, I'm losing money because I'm not working, right? So think about how At that point, if you're being challenged and you don't have the resource, who has to walk away? At that very point, right? And then you get to the point where the handwriting specialist looks and says, this many signatures we're going to take away. And then you have to go get affidavits. Who has the capacity and the time to go back to people that have already signed your petition and say, hey, can you sign my affidavit stating that you signed my petition? So then you lose another realm of people that, okay, they made it this far, but they're like, I don't have the capacity to go find these people. And so you just lose qualified people. The voters lose the right at that point to choose between candidate A, B, or C because someone has to withdraw. And even after all of that, I've learned that even after all of that, there's this hearing judge or officer that still can decide if they will accept your affidavits. I'm like, what kind of system? So you go back, you do all the work, get the affidavits, and it's still up to a person to say, we're not going to accept these. I'm just this this is democracy. You know, it's very it's unfair, right? It lends itself to those with money and power because all the things while you're doing that, so you got to pay an attorney who has to advocate for you and guide you and direct you, and so you still got to do all of that. Um, and for a school board seat, right? You would think you want someone that has a lived experience, who has stake in the game, right? Who comes from the community, who's run a nonprofit, may not be wealthy, but have all of the things that you want to see, but you don't really get a chance to see that because, that person has to go to work. That person has to take care of their family. I had to get a babysitter for my younger child while I was down there 8 hours a day because camp hadn't started yet.
Yeah.
Right?
Um, Let me back up real quick and then I'll go forward again. District 10A, tell us the district, the area, the neighborhoods, crossing streets, things like that, just to give folks a understanding of where this is.
Yeah. So when you think of District 10A, you kind of think of like the lake, right? So we have a little bit of a lake. We have High Park, we have North Kenwood, we have South Shore, Jackson Highlands, or Jackson Park, depending on who you're asking. You have a little bit of Chatham. Um, and they've literally cut it into two, right? Because there's District 10A and 10B, then there's 6A and 6B. So it gets very confusing. But I like to think if you go along Lakeshore, right? To 31st Street, and then you go to the Dan Ryan Lake to like 81st, I believe it is. Right? It's a big district.
That's
It's,
huge. And those are a lot of students, a lot of Black students.
it's a lot of Black students. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
hmm
So, um, what was the result of your challenge?
So it looks like I will be thrown off the ballot. I haven't as of yet, right? Um, but I was able to I needed 94 affidavits. I was able to get 70 of the affidavits. I was facing two different challengers, right? So unlike most people that were facing one, I had two different entities. They challenged over 82% of my signatures, which is crazy. Um, and yeah, so we're kind of here. I'm in the waiting phase. And so I'm technically still on the ballot, but because I may get kicked off, we're launching a write-in campaign. Yeah.
Wow. So, for those listening, hold on, let me see where I'm at. I just had a thought you were talking about before you said right on, right off. Oh, you had two challengers. Do you have a sense of who's behind it, because with the challenger folks is that it could be any regular
Yeah.
registered voter that can, they're willing to use their, you can lend them their name. And then typically the campaign or the organization that's behind the challenge will have an attorney draw up all the papers to
Hmm.
essentially object to your petitions. And how this works is once everybody submits their petitions, people can get copies of them. And then they can go through and identify which signatures they want to challenge and on what grounds, have the attorney drop the papers. And the person, the voter that is, it could be my grandmother, for instance. My grandmother has no idea what's going on for real, but she likes Tameka's opponent and she said, hey, I want you to do this, do me a favor. Can you sign this paper to make this challenge, to challenge these petitions? And my grandmother says, yeah. And then she goes about her business. And so, but someone tapped my grandmother, someone asked my grandmother, again, a campaign or organization. So do you have a sense of who might be behind your challenge?
Yeah, so the Urban Center has publicly stated that they are behind um, most of the challenges on one side, right? So the Urban Center is one, and then, the incumbent, right, is definitely behind the other by way of another entity. My objector reviewer, right? There's two people that were sent down to sit with me and go through the line by line from the challengers. And one of the objectors is seen at a fundraiser with the incumbent, right? So even if the incumbent is like, I had nothing to do with it, their person who was sitting next to me for 8 hours a day, 5 days throughout that week is seen, hanging out at a fundraiser, right? And so I'm directly linking that particular challenge to my opponent.
Got it. So the Urban Center, is it a recently formed 501c4?
Paul Vallis. That's the Urban Center is Paul Vallis's pack. Yeah,
Yeah, and also Juan Rangel, he's a former Uno charter school, so they're very pro-choice, if you will.
that's right.
Um, and do you have a background in education?
So I've been a substitute teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I started off working actually in a charter school, right? And so years ago, I was the director of family and community engagement
Mm-hmm.
at a charter school in Inglewood. I have worked with CPS as an intern in their family and community engagement department. So I have a background in education on kind of the admin side, aside from being a substitute teacher and my moonlighting days. Um,
And I
yes.
think that's it seems like a well-rounded background, if you will, because you've seen the classroom, but you also seen the back end, and bringing that to the into the role. Would you say?
Yeah, I think so.
I think it's important that if you are running for anything, this is me editorializing, but if you're running for anything that has anything to do with kids, you should have had some experience with kids in addition to your own. So,
I think that's important. I
yeah.
agree.
So those are the folks that challenged you. Obviously, Chicago charter schools have been experiencing a lot of issues and challenges, and with this new administration, hasn't been as kind to it. What's your position on charter schools, especially since you've worked in one in some capacity?
Yeah, so I worked in a charter school, right? I've also my children attended a charter school, in the past. I really feel that charter schools really need to do more for Black students. And I'm just going to be, frankly honest if I can, right? And so I'm trying to say this in a way that isn't here's the deal,
Say
right?
it. Say it.
Oh,
We
okay.
here.
Thank you. You know, when I think of the charter schools that, pop up, they're popping up to, in their mind, fill a void that a public school, is lacking or missing, right? Which is taking away resources from said public school, right? I really feel that we really need to figure out how to just invest in the schools that we have in the neighborhoods, right? I live right across the street from a school. I literally live in walking distance of two schools, right? I happen to be in an area where there are not many charter schools, right? There are a few, but I want to figure out what we can do to do right so that children, my children in particular, right, can go to a school within walking distance. And this isn't to say that some charter schools are not working, right? But it's also to say they're there for a reason. They're there because of lack in a public school. Well, let's fill that lack. Let's fill that void in the public school so that we do not have to keep opening charter schools.
Definitely fair. So you are planning on running an independent write-in campaign. Um, what challenges does that present to you, and what advantages does it present to you? Have you considered any of those?
Yeah, I mean, challenges is simply I'm not on the ballot, right? And so a lot of the work will be going across this large district, which we've already established, and literally getting people to know my name, right? Getting people to understand, even how to do a write-in campaign, right? Because you can write my name on the ballot, but don't fill in the bubble, and then that's no, right? Um, and so we're going to be doing teach-ins throughout the communities, right? So that people write in teach-ins, what we're calling them, so that people really understand how to do a write-in campaign or write-in ballot. Part of the thing for me, one of the advantages I feel is that I've had to go back and knock on doors already to get affidavits, right? So I've already had two touch points with certain voters, right? I've already, you know, called people. I've reached out, the email to people so they know my name because of that, right? And I think that's important. Um, my opponent's name is also something that they're running on, right? And
Who's
so
your opponent?
Trey Rhymefest Smith. So you see his name, even if you don't know him, you're like, I know that name. You know what I mean? You're like, oh, I know that name, right? And so it's like, okay, well, how can Tameka Walton, how can they say, let me write that name in? You know what I mean? So it's like we, my campaign has to just do the work, and getting people to know my name, but also understand the importance of literally filling out the ballot, understanding the ballot.
Yeah. Um, you manage your entire did you manage you essentially manage your entire challenge process, correct? You didn't have an attorney or anything like that?
I had an attorney.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay, you did.
I had an attorney. I had an attorney um who helped, navigate it, but it was my first time
Mhm.
obviously going through it, but the attorney technically, navigated it. I had to with my team go back and get the affidavits, and I showed up with a couple volunteers and actually did like the signature reviews, but I had an attorney to lean on for like technical reasons and showing up to the hearings and all the things.
Yeah, that's definitely a good choice. So, are you planning on that took some money, and then these whole teach-ins, um, cultivating your volunteers will be a feat. Website things, collateral assets. Um, you know, have you raised any money? What's your plan, your fundraising plan, and things like that?
Yeah, we raise a little bit of money, you know, not a whole lot at the moment. Um, and I'll be very honest with you, the challenges took a lot of the campaign time away. And so I lost about 3.5 weeks, right? S- Throughout my challenging process. And technically again, we're still kind of going through it, but we've decided to move forward because we're losing time, right? Um, and so our campaign launch is coming up in 2 weeks. And we have a couple of fundraisers that are gonna, come down the pipeline. But we've raised just enough to get by, just enough to get by.
Yeah. Um, you've got 106 days until that day.
That's
So
right.
So I'll pivot this into just kind of what your campaign platform is, right? And so you mentioned, some the plights of Black children. There's a Black student success initiative. It's a 5-year plan that the district has. Um, what's your understanding of that plan, and how will you as a board member move that along? I will say,
Mhm.
again, in a former life, I played a pivotal role in getting those maps and getting that piece in the legislation, actually. And so, that's me in my own capacity. Um, but just curious on, how do you plan on moving this plan forward, um, your commitment to it, and all of that.
Yeah. So first question was my understanding, and I want to just talk about that for just a second. So, any plan that is in place to, bridge like achievement gaps, right? Um, for students that look like me, right? And improve learning experiences, right? For children that look like me, I'm all for it, right? For children, for any child, what I think about my children, right? Coming from the lens of a Black mother, I think it's very important that we have plans in place to support the learning of Black males. I'm raising three of them, right? That we understand that not everybody learns the same, that it isn't a one size fit all pot across the board, um, that we're rolling out for all children, right? Because not everyone is the same. And I think sometimes educators, we get stuck in that it's a one size fit all, right? So to move a plan like that forward for me is a priority. I have a third grader who's going into third grade, right? And there's data that says if a Black child isn't reading by third grade, that, they're going to end up is what is it, that pipeline to prison. You know what I mean? So I got real stake in the game, Nicole, I'm trying to tell you.
Mhm.
And I'm coming from that lens every time, wanting boys like my son, males like my son, girls like my daughter to have a fighting chance
Mhm.
when they graduate from Chicago public schools,
Yeah.
right? So how are we supporting the teachers, right? You know, I have a cousin that's a Sika. So we have these conversations all the time. Like, what do you think that you might need in the classroom?
What's
Like,
a Sika?
um, so Sikas, they support the students that have like severe learning disabilities, right? Or learning delays. What's the relationship like between you and the teacher? Like, and then like I'm always asking these what seems like very basic questions, but questions that really, make dollars and cents, if that makes sense, right? And so just looking at what our particular schools need, it is one of the number one things on my agenda is moving that plan forward. Um, yes, you had another question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay, so you kind of mentioned it, just moving that plan forward and being able to understand, what the needs are and how they lean into them. Last week, week and a half ago, kind of like a week and a half ago, the district announced the committee members for the success, Black Student Achievement Committee. And, have you taken the time to look at them? Have you engaged with them? And even if you don't know them, as a board member, how do you plan, how do you think, what would it look like to engage with them and support their efforts?
Yeah, I know a couple of the members, and it looks like just having conversations. It looks like understanding, how they plan on moving the plan forward and what it will look like for a board member to support them, I guess. And also how the community can get involved and understand. I think sometimes we forget community, it common sense. But when we're talking about plans for our children, these children technically belong to someone else, right? So how are we engaging the stakeholders around these particular plans? And so I would love to, you know, sit and support the work, but also bridge the gap between making sure that the community isn't an afterthought as this stuff is rolling out.
Yeah, 1000%. When you were talking about just the general understanding and support or commitment rather to the plan, you mentioned um, just like that pipeline, that third grade reading level pipeline, and we've all got stories behind that. Um, and so I did do research on that. They actually said that's not true, but it is definitely there is some there, correlation is not causation, but it
Right.
definitely um because actually one of my third grade students, he's serving a bid for murder right now in state prison, you
Mm.
know. So and he was a very smart kid, but very challenged.
Can I ask
Very
you a
challenged.
question?
Mhm.
When you said that, I don't know if how did that land in your body? How did that make you feel?
Well, it's very sad,
Mm.
and it hits home because I was just a teacher. I was in my first year of training. I wasn't even a full teacher of record, and I remember him just being a challenging student. He couldn't sit on the rug during read alouds because he was always messing with other students and getting in trouble, and it was very rare. He was smart. Like when he did sit down and do his work,
Mm.
he would do it, and he'd do it well, especially math.
Mm.
He just needed that hand holding, and there was a lot of need there that I at the time didn't have the foresight, but also the supports weren't there. He didn't receive special services. We did small groups, you know, for literacy. I don't think he got pullouts or anything like that. So, he was just a bad kid,
Yeah.
you know. And I did that in air quotes for those listening. That's how he was labeled. He was a troubled child. Um, and sometimes I just wish, like, man, I wish I knew more at that time, but I also just wish that there was more in place um for him, for students like him.
Mm. So students like him, but also for the families, right?
Yeah.
Because I initially think about what was his home life like? What was his mother going through, right? Who was raising him? His grandmother, mother, aunt. I always think about that. And if I can pivot back to the work that we do in Restored Hope, that's why we do it. Because we're always like, if a mother is centered and have the resources that she needs, it should be more available to her children, right? Um, and I think we sometimes in the schools we remove home from the situation because it's hard to get parents into the doors for whatever reasons. So we're just like, we're gonna deal with what we have, but we really cannot remove the parents. And so I'm very interested in really trying to figure out how to completely have that wraparound support, not only for the students, but for the families as well, right? And what does it look like to have a functional neighborhood school where families can come and get, the resources that they need, that they feel welcome by the principal, by the teachers, that we don't have parent rooms for fluff, but that parent rooms are all actually being utilized by the parents because if we can reach the parents, then more than likely we can reach the students.
Yeah. So, just a couple more questions. CPS is facing a lot of issues over over $700 million shortfall, massive layoffs, 801 teacher aides, 760 teachers, 162 people in central office, chronic absenteeism for students and teachers. So, what can you do?
Um, so I
Or
want
what do
to
you
say,
want to do? What can you do in this
yeah,
capacity? Because, people think, oh, you're elected official, you should be able to
that's
fix
right.
everything. And sometimes it's very limited in what you can do depending on the office. So what can you do and what would you like to do?
Yeah, I think I first I want to say that in this particular seat, we are like, I mean, if you know anything about like boards, we're just essentially the board. There is management, right? So we are the ones that help steer and guide the actual management, right? And so for someone coming in like me new, I'm putting a lot of time researching and learning, right? Trying to understand how CPS got to where they are right now. I don't want to say that I am gonna be a one, you know, fix it all type person because there are 21 of us, right? They're essentially moving into the first fully elected school board, one president, and then 20 board members, right? So across the board, we got to work together and agree on how to move the mission forward, right? So my part is coming to the table with understanding a little bit about management because I've run a nonprofit for the last 15 years or 16 years. And just really trying to understand the numbers, right? But also, as I'm doing all of that, going right back to how does this impact our students, right? How does this impact the staff? How does it impact our parents or our families so that as we're moving the mission forward, right? Which is mission of CPS, those decisions are not on the backs of those that stand to lose, right? Does that make sense? So all I'm saying is that, you know, I got to work with other people to do the job. My job is to come with my skill set, also, connect with my community and understand what exactly they would like to see happen while educating them. Because a lot of folks don't even understand what the Chicago School Board does, or even that there isn't even a race going on, right? While coming back to the table and working with 20 other folks to make these decisions. And that's my answer, Nicole, and I'm sticking with it.
Mhm. I'm with it. So you've got this campaign. Um, what support endorsements have you secured already? Who are you trying to align with? All of that. These are the metrics for a successful campaign. So who's endorsed you, but also like what are those other metrics of success that you either have secured or are seeking to secure so that people want to take it serious, so people can take you serious, because
Um,
you are a write-in candidate. It's going to be a larger challenge than most.
yeah. I am working currently hard to secure endorsements that really align with, who I am as a person, and then also, where my candidacy will go as far as being a write-in candidate. Um, Currently, I am endorsed by CTU, Chicago Teacher Union. They're the first ones to endorse me. I've had other interviews, waiting for folks to announce or whatever. I have some conversations with some folks that currently hold office. that I'm hoping that will consider endorsing me. Um, part of the battle too is just, again, getting my name out there, right? So having the conversations, not only for endorsement reasons, but this is who I am, right? Um, Connections are important, especially for this campaign. And so that's kind of where I'm at with it. And so currently I'm endorsed by the Chicago Teachers Union.
That's good. You mentioned you want to raise more money. Who are you going to say yes to? Who are you going to say no to? And, sometimes you don't know yet, but, just where you are today, who would you would want to look back and be like, I'm glad I took that money, or I don't know.
Yeah. Well, you know, what I'm learning is that there are a lot of special interest in the Chicago school board race, right? I have to take money from people who I feel really align with where I am and who I am. Um, all this will be on paper at some point. And so I want to be able, when people look up, my track record and look up who I've forged alliances with, that it speaks to my character and my name because I am building my name right now. Literally, I am running a campaign on my name. And so I just want to make sure that I am partnering with people that want to serve the community.
So, how do people find out more about you? What's coming up for you where people can learn more? Because you're going to have to get your name out there, girl.
Yeah,
So, how do people find you? What's next? All of that.
yeah. So right now we are on social media. Um, we are what are we? Tameka Walton for Chicago School Board District 10A.
How do you spell that?
Tamekawalton. Thank you, Nicole, because spelling my name is very important. Thank you
Very.
for thank you for that. So that's where we are. We will have our website up by the end of the week, but folks are just kind of following us right now on social media. On social media.
Got it. And you mentioned a launch. Is that still TBD or?
Yep, my folks, my kitchen cabinet are working through that time frame right now, and so we will circle back
Yep.
on that launch.
Yep. So you've got 106 days. Anything else you want to share with the people to know more about you?
Um, Not really, only that, this race is important. One, it's historic, right? We've are moving from, the appointed school board to folks that the community will pick, right? And so I just feel that it's very important that people are doing their research on their candidates. Each district has two, 10A and 10B, 1A, 1B, right? So understanding where they are within their district, understanding, what the Chicago School Board does, and just making sure that they vote. It's going to be at the bottom of the ballot, right? And so most folks are just like, don't want to get that far. But this is important. This is important. We're talking about the future of our children right now. And so just making sure that we stick it out and actually vote or write in, and yeah, just follow me on social media.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Miss Walton.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you, Nicole.